The summer of 1831 was suffocatingly hot in Southampton County, Virginia. Fields of tobacco and cotton stretched endlessly under the sun, their leaves trembling in the heavy heat. Slaves worked tirelessly, their backs bent, their spirits broken. Among them walked Nat Turner, small in stature but extraordinary in mind and spirit. He was quiet, observant, and deeply religious. But behind his calm demeanor burned a storm that no one could predict. Nat had always been different. From a young age, he claimed to see visions, warnings and messages he believed came directly from God. He spoke rarely of them, but when he did, his words carried an intensity that made listeners tremble. To the white owners, he was strange, and sometimes unnerving. To fellow slaves, he was a figure of hope, fear, and awe. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and comment below. Where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? Nat Turner's story is not just history. It's a chilling journey into fear, vengeance, and revolt. Nat's visions intensified in 1831. He claimed that God had spoken directly to him. It was his destiny to lead his people out of slavery by any means necessary. At first, he kept these revelations to himself, meditating in the shadows, praying in secret, and observing the injustices that surrounded him. But every cruel word, every brutal strike, and every injustice committed by the white masters fueled a burning determination in his heart. He carefully studied the landscape of the county, the fields, the plantations, the homes of slave owners. He noted the guards, the paths to escape, and the vulnerabilities of the estate structures. Every observation, every whispered detail, became part of a plan that would soon terrify the South. Nat Turner did not act rashly. He waited. He chose the timing with divine precision. He studied the behavior of the slave owners, their routines, and the complacency that allowed cruelty to go unchecked. He gathered a small band of trusted men, those who shared his vision and courage. Together, they formed a secret, unstoppable force, moving quietly under the cover of night, ready to strike when the moment came. On the evening of August 21st, 1831, a full moon hung low over Southampton County. Shadows stretched across the fields, the perfect cloak for what was about to unfold. Nat addressed his small group, his voice low but commanding. The time has come. God has given us this night. We strike for freedom, for justice, and for the years of suffering endured. The men listened, their faces illuminated by the moonlight and their hearts pounding with both fear and resolve. They knew that what they were about to do would change history, and that the price of failure would be unimaginable. As they moved, from farm to farm, Nat's careful planning became horrifyingly effective. Each plantation he struck was precise, deliberate, and merciless. He had studied the households, known exactly where families slept, and targeted those who upheld the system of oppression. Within the first hours, the rebellion struck fear into the hearts of everyone who thought themselves untouchable. Wordless, terror spread faster than Nat could move. Families woke to chaos, screams echoed across the fields. The quiet, oppressed, and overlooked had become an unstoppable force. Nat's small band, guided by his visions and tactical genius, killed 55 people in just 48 hours, a staggering number that would leave the South reeling in horror. Even as the violence unfolded, Nat Turner remained calm. He moved like a shadow, through the night, his mind sharp, his purpose unwavering. He did not revel in bloodshed for cruelty's sake. He acted out of divine conviction and years of oppression. To him, every strike was both punishment and prophecy, the fulfillment of a destiny that no one else could understand. The plantation owners, once confident and arrogant, were caught completely off guard. Panic spread across Southampton County. Guards attempted to respond, but the insurgents moved faster, striking silently, vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. Rumors of a single unseen leader, a man guided by visions and divine wrath, spread like wildfire. By the early hours of August 22, 1831, Southampton County was engulfed in chaos. Nat Turner and his small band of insurgents had struck multiple plantations with terrifying precision, leaving a trail of horror that no one could comprehend. Families awoke to screams, fires, and the realization that their authority, once absolute, had been shattered in a single night. Nat moved like a shadow through the county, each action deliberate, each strike calculated. He targeted those who had upheld slavery with the most cruelty, believing that punishment must match the crime. His followers, inspired by his conviction and courage, acted with the same methodical ferocity. There was no hesitation, no mercy for those who had caused suffering. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and comment below. Where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? This night will show how fear itself can become a weapon wielded by the oppressed against the powerful. Panic spread quickly. By sunrise, news of the rebellion reached neighboring towns. Horsemen galloped through the county carrying the terrible word. Nat Turner had led an uprising, killing dozens in less than 48 hours. Merchants, plantation owners, and militia members scrambled, arming themselves and searching desperately for the insurgents. But Nat Turner was elusive. He knew every back road, every forest path, every hiding place. The land itself seemed to obey his knowledge and intent. As the sun rose, Nat and his followers regrouped in hidden woods, catching their breath, tending minor injuries, and planning the next strikes. Their courage was bolstered by the knowledge that they were no longer individuals acting alone. They were symbols of rebellion, carrying the fury of generations of oppression. The local militia quickly mobilized, attempting to contain the revolt. Mounted men patrolled roads, sentries guarded plantations, and armed groups searched homes. But Nat's insurgents moved faster, striking again before reinforcements could arrive. Each attack was a mix of stealth and ferocity. They appeared suddenly, left destruction behind, and vanished into the forests before pursuit could succeed. Word of their actions created paralyzing fear among the white population. Families barricaded themselves, slaves whispered warnings of Nat's approach, and the county teetered on the brink of collapse. Even the most confident plantation owners questioned their power, realizing too late that the quiet, observant slave they had ignored was now the most dangerous force in Virginia. Nat Turner's tactical brilliance was matched by his psychological impact. Rumors of visions and divine guidance spread rapidly among slaves and free black communities, inspiring whispers of hope and revolution. Among the white population, terror took hold. Parents held children tightly, merchants feared leaving their shops, and local leaders convened hastily to strategize. No one knew where Nat would strike next, or how many had already fallen. Despite the fear, Nat remained composed. He communicated with his followers in hushed tones, planning each move with care. His vision, the guiding force behind every action, was unwavering. To him, the rebellion was not chaos. It was a fulfillment of destiny, a divine act of justice against a system built on cruelty. The attacks continued into the second day. 55 men, women, and children had been killed in just 48 hours, a staggering number that left Southampton County in complete disarray. Panic-stricken residents barricaded themselves inside homes. Militia patrols were relentless but ineffective, and the stories of Nat's divine guidance spread like wildfire. Nat and his band knew that they could not remain in one place. Every attack increased the urgency of escape. He guided his followers through hidden paths, ensuring that none of them were captured or killed. Even as reinforcements closed in, he moved with uncanny knowledge of terrain, timing, and strategy. Fear became both a weapon and a shield, amplifying the psychological impact of their rebellion. By the end of the second day, authorities realized the rebellion could not be contained by ordinary means. They issued proclamations, mobilized larger militias, and began hunting Nat Turner with unprecedented force. Yet Nat remained elusive, a shadow in the forests, a whisper in the wind, a nightmare in the minds of those who had once held unchecked power. The county was paralyzed. Plantation owners no longer felt safe on their own land. Militia leaders worried that Nat's influence would spread beyond Southampton County. Rumors amplified every action, making the rebellion seem larger and more unstoppable than it truly was. Nat Turner had become more than a man. He had become a symbol of fear, justice, and vengeance. By the third day of the rebellion, Southampton County was a land of terror and whispers. Nat Turner had vanished into the dense forests, yet his presence was felt everywhere, in the frantic whispers of slaves, in the pale faces of plantation owners, in the trembling hands of local militia. Every step he took was calculated, every decision executed with divine precision. But even the cleverest man cannot outrun the weight of an entire region mobilized against him. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and comment below. Where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? Nat Turner's story now moves toward its chilling climax. A hunt that would terrify the South and leave an enduring legacy of fear. Authorities quickly realized that traditional tactics would not suffice. Militia units scoured forests, rivers, and fields. Patrols were doubled. Local communities were warned to report any suspicious activity, and fear spread faster than gnats. Footsteps. Plantation owners knew instinctively that the man they had underestimated, the quiet, observant slave, was not simply hiding. He was strategically orchestrating fear itself. Nat Turner, however, remained calm. He used the terrain to his advantage. Forests became his shield, rivers his escape routes, and abandoned cabins his temporary refuge. He communicated only with trusted followers, ensuring the rebellion's survival while minimizing exposure. Every movement was deliberate, every action calculated to prolong the psychological impact on those who pursued him. As the hunt intensified, Nat's followers began to disperse. Some were captured, some fled to safety, but his presence lingered in the collective consciousness. Rumors exaggerated his numbers, his divine guidance, and his invincibility. By the time he was finally cornered, Nat Turner had become more than a man. He was a living terror. The confrontation came after days of tracking. Nat was captured by a group of militia led by determined local authorities. Despite his small stature, his calm demeanor unnerved them. He did not resist violently. His strength lay in the fear he had already instilled and the unshakable conviction in his purpose. Even in chains, he was a symbol of the rebellion that had shattered their sense of security. News of Nat Turner's capture spread rapidly. The South, already shaken by the 55 lives lost, now faced the grim reality that one man's actions could ignite rebellion and terrorize an entire region. White communities tightened control over slaves, fearful of hidden insurrections. Fear replaced confidence. Whispers replaced casual conversations. Mistrust seeped into every corner of society. Nat Turner's trial was swift, but his influence extended far beyond the courtroom. The narrative of his rebellion inspired both fear and fascination. Slaves whispered his name cautiously, seeing him as a symbol of vengeance and divine justice. Among white communities, he became the embodiment of every nightmare they had long ignored: the power of the oppressed, the consequences of cruelty, and the unstoppable force of conviction. Even in captivity, Nat Turner remained composed. He spoke with unwavering belief in his visions, explaining that his actions were guided by God. To the authorities, this only intensified their terror. They realized that what they had feared was not merely the man, but the idea he had unleashed, that oppression could be challenged by intelligence, strategy, and unwavering faith. The execution of Nat Turner did not erase his legacy. Southampton County, and indeed much of the South, lived in heightened fear for years afterward. Laws became stricter, patrols more vigilant, and the psychological weight of his rebellion lingered like a dark shadow over every plantation. Weeks had passed since Nat Turner's capture, yet Southampton County remained gripped by paralyzing fear. The rebellion had left 55 dead in just 48 hours, and the memory of the violence lingered like a poisoned fog. Plantation owners, merchants, and local authorities moved cautiously, suspecting every whisper, every glance, every minor act of defiance among slaves. Even minor unrest felt like a spark capable of igniting a second revolt. Nat Turner had vanished from the physical world, confined in chains, but his psychological presence continued to dominate. Rumors spread that he had divine guidance, that his vision could not be broken, and that any act of cruelty could provoke him or someone like him in secret. Slaves whispered his name with reverence. The powerful feared it as a curse. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and comment below. Where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? Nat Turner's story is now about more than murder. It is about the enduring terror of an idea that cannot be imprisoned. Across Virginia, the rebellion inspired both fear and awe. Militia units were dispatched to patrol rural communities, and strict laws were enacted to prevent gatherings of slaves or discussions of insurrection. Families grew paranoid. Neighbors distrusted one another. Nat Turner had introduced a terror that could not be quantified by numbers alone. The psychological impact of his revolt was greater than the physical damage. Even children on plantations learned his name as a warning. Do not anger the Lord's chosen. Do not test what you cannot control. For slaves, Nat became a figure of hope and quiet rebellion. Tales of his courage and strategic genius spread in secret. His ability to strike fear into the most powerful men while remaining elusive elevated him to legendary status, inspiring acts of resistance, cautious defiance, and hope for freedom. The white population, however, reacted with relentless measures. Patrols doubled, travel restrictions were imposed, and gatherings were outlawed. Authorities warned that any trace of rebellion could be met with brutal retaliation. Yet, the terror persisted, because Nat Turner had shown how vulnerable the system truly was. The fear he instilled did not fade. It became a permanent shadow, altering social dynamics and control mechanisms for decades. Nat's influence also extended into the realm of storytelling. Oral histories and whispered legends painted him as both divinely inspired and terrifying, a man who had shattered the illusion of absolute control. Slaves revered him. They repeated his visions and strategies in hushed tones, preparing younger generations to understand courage, patience, and tactical intelligence. Meanwhile, white communities treated him as a cautionary tale, the embodiment of what happens when oppression meets calculated vengeance. Even in captivity, Nat Turner remained composed, calm, and unyielding. His trial did not break him. Each statement he made, each reference to his visions, served to strengthen the psychological impact of his rebellion. He was more than a man. He was a living symbol that justice, when guided by conviction and strategy, could strike fear into those who believed themselves untouchable. Nat Turner's story became an enduring warning across the South. Cruelty may rule the day, but intelligence, patience, and belief could turn the oppressed into a terrifying force. Slaves, inspired by his defiance, continued to look for opportunities to resist subtly, to survive strategically, and to hope for a day when freedom could be achieved. Even decades later, historians, storytellers, and descendants of the rebellion would recount Nat Turner's actions. His legendary 48 hours of revolt were remembered not just for the lives lost, but for the shockwaves of fear, paranoia, and psychological power he unleashed. Southampton County became a place where caution replaced arrogance, whispers replaced idle chatter, and the shadow of one determined man haunted the collective memory. Nat Turner had not just killed 55 people, he had destroyed the illusion of control that the South had long relied upon. His rebellion proved that even the quietest, smallest, and most overlooked individuals could wield unimaginable influence when guided by conviction, intelligence, and divine vision. Nat Turner's execution on November 11, 1831, was meant to close the chapter on Southampton County's nightmare. The authorities believed that by ending his life, they could erase the terror he had unleashed. But as they led him to the gallows, chains clinking, the reality was clear. Nat Turner's influence could not be extinguished with rope or fire. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and comment below. Where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? Nat Turner's story isn't just about rebellion. It's about the power of one individual to strike fear, inspire hope, and alter the course of history. In the weeks and months following his death, Southampton County and the wider South remained in turmoil. Militia patrols increased, laws restricting slave gatherings became stricter, and fear permeated every plantation. Families who had once dismissed the possibility of rebellion now lived in constant anxiety, questioning every glance from their slaves, every subtle act of defiance. Nat Turner's rebellion had proven one undeniable truth: the oppressed could and would fight back in ways no one expected. Meanwhile, the enslaved communities whispered his name like a prayer. To them, Nat Turner had become a symbol of courage, justice, and divine guidance. Even those too young to have witnessed the revolt understood the legend. A man, small yet extraordinary, who dared to challenge centuries of oppression and paid the ultimate price. His story became a blueprint for hope and resistance, a lesson that even in chains, the mind and spirit could remain free. Nat Turner's story also sparked a profound psychological impact across the South. Plantation owners, terrified of another uprising, scrutinized every action of their slaves. Trust vanished, and paranoia replaced authority. Militia presence became permanent, and communities built systems of surveillance and control to prevent anything resembling Turner's revolt. In effect, fear became a new tool of governance, a direct response to the terror Nat had unleashed. Even historians and writers who came later recognized the duality of Nat Turner's legacy. On one hand, he was feared and vilified by those in power. On the other, he was revered and celebrated by the oppressed and those who sought justice. His life demonstrated the terrifying power of one individual who combined intelligence, conviction, and opportunity, a person who could, in 48 hours, alter the psychology of an entire society. The moral weight of Nat Turner's actions remains complex. To some, he was a murderer. To others, a liberator. But there is no denying the lasting impression of his courage, strategy, and unflinching belief in his divine purpose. His rebellion challenged not only slavery, but also the complacency, arrogance, and cruelty of the Southern elite. The 55 lives lost became the spark that forced the South to reconsider the fragility of its authority. Nat Turner's story endured in oral histories, folklore, and eventually academic study. Children heard tales of his visions. Slaves passed down stories of his fearlessness. Historians dissected his strategies. Every retelling reinforced one essential truth: even the smallest, quietest, and most overlooked individuals can wield unstoppable power when guided by purpose and faith. As the years passed, Southampton County slowly recovered physically, but the psychological scars lingered for generations. Families who had once dismissed the possibility of insurrection remained haunted by Nat Turner's revolt. Slaves who had survived the rebellion told stories of their leader's courage, ensuring that his legacy would never fade. The land itself seemed to remember the horror, a constant reminder that oppression always carries the risk of retribution. Nat Turner had been captured, tried, and executed, yet his invisible hand had changed the course of history, leaving a shadow that terrified the South, inspired the oppressed, and challenged the moral conscience of a nation. He was a man who had faced unimaginable odds, acted with unwavering conviction, and left an indelible mark on the world.